Hi everyone, you're very welcome to our fifth Minecraft episode. My name is Neve and today I'm joined by Kaylin.
Hi, everyone.
And we also have the rest of our DreamSpace team on in the background to help out. You can also pop this webinar on pause at any point, so if you maybe get stuck, please feel free to pop the webinar on pause. So, as I mentioned last week, episode 4, 5, and 6 are all based around different themes, and last week's theme was Atlantis and water. However, today's theme is ancient Egypt, and we're going to learn about 3 famous facts about Egypt before we get started coding. So, the first fact I have about Egypt is the River Nile. Well, the River Nile is the longest river in the world, and it can be found in Egypt. The next fact I have is the Great Pyramids, which are found in Egypt, are a historical landmark which are known all around the world. And the last fact I have is that Egypt experiences sandstorms quite often, and the Egyptians have had to learn how to deal with these sandstorms. So now, that's all the facts I have for now. I'm going to pass on over to Kaylin, and Kaylin is going to get started on the coding.
Okay, thanks, Neve, for telling us those really interesting facts about ancient Egypt. So we're going to keep those in mind while we're building out our own Egyptian city today. But before we do that, let's quickly go over what we did last week with Atlantis. So I'm going to go into View My World and go into my Atlantis world from last week. So last week, what we did was we first of all went and we built our own lake. And we're actually going to be using that code a little bit later on. We also went underwater, and you can see here we built our little house underwater. We made our house completely airtight, which means that you'd be able to survive in this house. And we spawned our own NPC. Okay, so your home challenge last week was to continue building out more of these houses. So you could have used the same code, you could have just repeated it over, or you could have done what we did when we were recreating the story of the Three Little Pigs. So when we were recreating the story of the Three Little Pigs, we used our coordinates to build out the houses. So maybe you tried that out and that would have helped you build out your city a lot quicker. But let's click into our code now and have a look at what we did. So we got our agent to move around in a square 5 times. And then through building, we added on the roof. Hopefully, when you were doing your research for Atlantis, you found out that a lot of animals are meant to live in Atlantis as well as the mer people and the underwater folk. So, why don't we add in some animals as well? So, we've done this before in previous episodes where we have added in some creatures to our farm. Okay, and I'm just going to put in sea. I'm going to go into mobs because that is where we got our creatures from before. And I'm going to just spawn one because I know most people probably did this for the home challenge anyway. And I'm going to spawn a sea turtle because I think the sea turtles are adorable. And then I'm using the coordinates here and I see that they have the little tail, which means that they're the coordinates that relate to where I am as a player. So when I spawn that one, it should be exactly where I am. I'm going to type in sea. See if a sea turtle appears. Oh, there he is, already swimming away from me. Okay, so hopefully you were able to spawn some animals as well, or maybe that was my friend over there. Anyway, one of them was spawned. And that was my world of Atlantis. And I would have built out a lot more buildings as well, hopefully. Okay, so that was a quick revision of what we did last week, but let's get started on our theme for this week. So, like Neve said, we're working with ancient Egypt, and the weather and everything in ancient Egypt isn't similar to the weather we have in Ireland. So, I don't think using our flat grass, our blocks of grass, is going to work for this one. So, last week we learned about biomes, and we found them in our library and in Biomes and Worlds. let's see if there's anything that we could use here that we feel will work better when we are recreating ancient Egypt. So I don't think any of these ones will work. We have a lot of forests. We do have a desert. So let's work with desert and see what we can do. So it is a barren and inhospitable biome consisting mostly of sand dunes, cacti. Yeah, that sounds like it'll work. Okay, so just like we advised last week, if you click on Create World, that will then save this biome to your templates. And when you go back into templates, you will then be able to use that world when you're creating your new place. So I have my desert biome and create new. Okay, I'm going to name this one Egypt. And I'm going to turn down. That's okay. I'm going to turn on my coordinates. Always day. Make sure my classroom settings are all okay. And I'm going to have it perfect weather again. Okay, that all seems perfect. So now I'm going to create my world. Okay, so my desert world has been created here. If I double tap my spacebar and fly up to the sky, I'm able to see that I have a beautiful desert in front of me with loads of cacti and very little greenery around. A little bit of greenery over there, but that's okay. Some floating sand in the sky over there. But actually, this space here looks good because there's not a lot of mountains or anything in our way. So let's use this space for our city. Okay, so I'm going to fly down to the ground. Okay, and the first fact that Neve mentioned was the River Nile, which is the longest river in the world. It runs through Egypt. So let's try and create a piece of, not the entire Nile, because I think our agent would get tired, but a piece of the Nile. So I'm going to do C to open up my code builder and bring our friend, the agent, back into our world. I'm going to click on New Project and I'll call this one Egypt. Okay, and the first chat command that we always do is we type in here and we program our agent to teleport right next to us. I'm also going to get rid of on start and I'm going to zoom in a little bit to make sure that you guys can see the blocks. Okay, on chat command here. Okay. And I'm going to type in river because we're building a river this time. Now, let's think back to last week. Last week, we created a lake, but similar. I think it's going to be similar in the build. We said that our agent had to burrow down into the ground and then destroy the blocks in front of them while they were placing water behind them to create our lake. So this time, we don't have to make it in any sort of a square shape. We just wanted to go completely straight as if it was a river. So let's go into agent and remember that the first thing we did was we got them to destroy blocks. So agent, destroy any obstacles that are in their way. Make that true. Then we told our agent to move down by 1. Okay. And then we wanted them to move forward. Okay, and we can get them to move forward by 20. Okay, and we want them to also place water behind them. So we're going to agent, place on move, but we don't want them to place the water until they get down underground. Okay, so I think that's actually going to be quite a thin river. So I might actually get my agent to turn around, similar to the way that they did when creating the lake, just to make it a little bit thicker. So I'm going to get them to turn left. Oh, sorry, I mean move left, not turn left. Okay, and then they're going to move backwards. We just need to make sure that we turn this on to true so we don't have any bugs in our code. Okay. And I'm going to now just fly up into the sky. Okay, so before I do that, actually, my agent doesn't have any blocks. So I need to give our agent some water. Okay, our bucket of water that we used last week. Right click on our agent's face and hand them over some water. Okay, fly up into the sky, E to talk, and type in river. Okay, and that's the beginning of our river Nile. So you could get your agent to build your river a lot bigger than we have here. You could also get them to build a river the whole way around your town. It's completely up to you. This was only a little part of the Nile. It's only a part of it. It's not the entire Nile. Okay, so the next point that Neve made was the pyramids. So we have the ancient pyramids that are in Egypt. So let's think about the shape of a pyramid for a little bit. What is the bottom of a pyramid? Well, a pyramid is actually square on the bottom. And then as it goes up, those squares can get smaller and smaller, and that will build a pyramid for you in Minecraft. So I want you to pause the webinar now, and I want you to draw it out on a piece of paper and see, how do you think we would be able to code each individual piece of our pyramid? So draw out each level of the pyramid and count maybe the amount of blocks that we'll need or how big each side is. So pause the webinar now and try and work it out. But I'm going to press C, and I'm going to add in another chat command block in the meantime, and I'm going to call it pyramid. Okay, so I'm going to go to player, on chat command, and I'm going to name this one pyramid. Okay, so we said before that the bottom of the pyramid is a square. So we know how to get our agent to build a square using blocks because we've done it so many times before. We're going to get our agent to place on move. Agent place on move true. Okay, and then we get them to move forward. So I'm going to make my pyramid quite small at the beginning. And then if my code is correct, I know that I'll be able to make it bigger if I want to. So I'm going to make it 6 cubes wide for the bottom. Okay, and then we get our agent to turn. Okay, and we want our agent to do that 4 times because we want them to create a square. So we know that we can go into loops and get them to repeat that 4 times and put it around these 2 blocks. Okay, so now our agent is going to build 1 square. But what do we want them to do then when they move up? So we want them to then move up 1 and build another square. But the next square isn't as big as the one on the bottom. So why don't we right click on this repeat block and duplicate that code, add it into our sequence here, but we're going to make it smaller. So if you've drawn out a little diagram of the pyramid, you'll know that when you move up onto the next level, it's not just 1 block smaller, it's actually 2, because there's a block missing from either side of the square, not just 1. So I'm then going to take away 2 from 6, which gives me 4. So my next level is only going to be 4 squares wide. So let's test out this code now and see if it works and what do we need to change. Well, actually, I didn't get my agent to move up yet. So I need to get my agent to move up 1 first, and then we'll test out our code. So agent, move up. Agent, move up 1. Okay, and now we're going to test out this code. So I'm going to go over here, do T to talk, and get my agent to come over to me. So here. Okay. I'm going to fly up in the air, and I'm going to do T to talk, and I'm going to type in pyramid. Okay, so I immediately see a problem there. We never changed the blocks that we had given our agent. So now we have suddenly a lake in the middle of Egypt, but we learned last week how to actually get rid of this. We learned that we can use sponge to absorb water. So I'm going to go into my E for everything. I'm going to type sponge. Okay, I'm going to bring it down to my inventory, and I'm going to look for the center of this water. So you can see how these blocks here aren't moving, whereas the ones beside it seem to be pushing the water down. So that's where I need to place my sponge because it's the center of the lake. So I'm going to place 1 block here, and it's going to absorb all of the water that our agent just placed. Okay. Now we need to give our agent the correct blocks. So we're working with sand and we're working in Egypt. So let's see if there's any sandstone. Okay, so we have a sandstone wall. Okay, we actually have loads of different options here. I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to go with my sand, just normal sandstone here. There's actually some very cool options there, so I could make a number of different pyramids out of different materials if I wanted to. Now I need to right-click on my agent and give them the sandstone. I can take back the water. Okay, and now I'm going to fly up and get them to test out that code. So T to talk and pyramid. Okay, so the square seems to be looking okay. We have a little centipede there floating beside, I think. Okay, so I see a problem here with our code. So I see that there's a bug obviously in our code because that's not what a pyramid looks like, because the square on top of it needs to be centered. Okay, let's have a look at our code. So what exactly do we want our agent to do? We want them to move up, yes, but then when they move up, we want them to move forward by one block before they start building out the next square. So let's try adding in a block to get our agent to move forward by one after they move up. So now they move up and they move forward by one, and then they build the next square. So let's test that one out. Okay. So we've learned throughout these weeks and in all of the series that coding is all about testing out your code, finding the bugs until it is perfect. So we're debugging our code right now. So we're doing T to talk, and I'm going to get my agent to come here. Okay, I'm going to fly up in the sky. T to talk. Type in pyramid. Okay, so the square on the bottom is okay again. Okay, so that's almost perfect. It's so close. In fact, it's perfect when you look at it from this side. So if we wanted our pyramid to only look perfect from one side, then we could continue. But I would not be happy with that because there is still a bug in our code. So what happened? Let's go into our code builder and see exactly what happened. Agent is placing every time he moves, he builds the square. Okay, so I think it's this very first block that we need to work with. We've told our agent to place a block every single time that they move. So we need to tell them that we don't want them to place a block when they move forward. Because when they move up one, that's okay, because they're filling the space where they would have been standing. But then when they move forward, we don't want them to place a block. So why don't we turn off, so put it in here and say place on move false and see if that works. So here we're telling our agent that we do want them to move, to place whenever they move, but then we don't when they've gone up one. But now that we've turned it off, we're going to have to turn it back on again and tell our agent that we do want it to move after that space. Okay, so this is getting quite complicated. We're going to have to duplicate our place on move block and turn it back on after it moves forward. Okay, so I'm going to go over here now. I'm going to go down to the ground, T to talk, get my agent to come over to me, fly up to the sky, T to talk, and pyramid to see if the bug has been fixed in our code. Okay, perfect. So that has gotten rid of that block that we didn't want there on the end. And that square seems to be perfectly centered. So the next thing that we need to do is we just need to continue building upwards. So we have a lot of code here and we want to use basically all of it again. So I'm going to copy out each one of these blocks again for the next one, the next level. So I'm going to duplicate move up by one, and I'm going to bring it down underneath this loop. Then I'm going to duplicate place on move. I'm going to duplicate forward, and I'm going to duplicate place on move. Now, there is going to be a lot of code in this block, but there is another way that you could do it using variables, which we would have mentioned 2 weeks ago. So at home, if you want to try and test it out and see if you'd be able to get it working with variables and using a maths block, go right ahead and let us know then next week if you got it to work or not. So I'm going to right click and duplicate this loop as well. Okay, and then I have 4, but remember that we need it to be 2 times smaller, 2 blocks smaller. So 4 minus 2 is 2. Okay, and then the next layer. Okay, so the next layer is 2 minus 2. So 2 minus 2 is 0, but we need another layer. So let's test this out and then have a think of what we could do for the top layer of our pyramid. So I'm going to fly down. I'm going to do T to talk, get my agent to come over here. And then I'm going to test out our code. Okay, so we're almost finished. We want just one more block on the top there to finish out our pyramid. So let's go to our code, and we do still want them to move up by 1. Yes. And we do still want them to stop placing blocks as they move forward. That's true. So duplicate that and bring it in. And then we do want them to move forward by 1, and we want them to place. But we don't need them to build another square. We just need one block. Okay, so now all we need them to do is, I think we just need them to move forward by 1, because we've told them that they can place blocks again, and we only need one more block. So let's test it out. There's a lot of testing in this code, but that's okay, because that's what makes us good coders. So T to talk here. Fly up to the sky. Pyramid. So a fun fact about pyramids while our agent is building it out is that it used to be a tomb for all the pharaohs that used to live in ancient Egypt. And they used to believe that they had to be buried with their treasure to actually survive in the afterlife. So pyramids have given us a lot of knowledge about ancient Egypt in the past, because our old pharaohs used to be buried with ancient artifacts. So we learned a lot about their lifestyle by going into our pyramids. So our little baby pyramid here seems to be perfect. Let's have a look at our code and see how could we make it bigger. So instead of going through all of this code again and taking away minuses, all we would do is we'd have to duplicate the top bit and add in another block that says 6 plus 2 is 8. So let's add in one more layer, and then we'll move on to our final task. So I'm going to duplicate that, and then I'm going to duplicate my move up 1. My place on move, need to turn it off. My move forward, and then place on move top. Okay, and I said 8. Okay, so this is making a slightly bigger pyramid beside our baby one over here for maybe a more important pharaoh to live into, or someone more important. T to talk here. T to talk pyramids. Okay, so we did bump into an error here. So if anyone noticed there, what happened was our agent bumped into this piece of a wall over here because we're missing an important block. We haven't added in the agent destroy obstacles block. So it was destroying the cactuses because the cactuses are quite fragile. But when our agent actually bumped into a mound of sand, it couldn't go any further, and that ruined the build of our pyramid. Okay, so we're going to have to try that one more time. So T to talk. Okay, so our agent is building the square. Aha, okay. So what I noticed there is our agent is destroying the block that was in front of them. We need to go back into our code builder and make sure that they don't destroy that block. So if they move forward by 1, we then want them to move up and left and then forward again. So to get that right, we'll have to add in more turning blocks here because they're going to go up, turn around, and then they're going to start building the next square. But we know that we don't actually have any obstacles in our way. So we can turn off the destroy obstacles once we know we don't have any. And then if we do, we can add in those extra turn blocks. Okay, let's try our build again over here. Okay, get our agent to come over here. Fly up to the sky. Fly up to the sky. T-tuck. Pyramid. Okay, and watch our agent finally build the pyramid. So that little bump into the square at the end there is actually what's keeping our pyramid nicely in shape. So if we add in that destroy obstacles block, even though it'll help us in the future if we are near a sand mound or something, it will actually ruin our build and mess with our code. So I want you to try and think about that at home. What blocks could we add in there to fix that bug in our code? Okay, we're nearly ready. And perfect. So that's our bigger pyramid. You could also, if you wanted to make your pyramid different colors, then all you'd have to do is every time they move up 1, you can go into agent and you can tell them what slot to use, just like we did with the pigs. So let's actually try that out now. So for the first one, we're okay with sandstone, which is active slot 1. Okay. Then we want them to use, we'll say active slot 2. We have to decide what we'll put in that. Okay, active slot 2. Then I want to do a pattern with it, and I want to have the next line back as active slot 1 again, and then I'm going to do 2 again. So I'm going to duplicate that one, and I'm going to bring it down in front of this loop. Okay, and then one more. I'm going to activate, set the active slot to 2. Okay, and then our very top block. And we need to make sure that we put that in before our agent moves. Okay, so now we need to decide what the other material we want to be. And I'm going to choose this red sandstone because I think it'll look quite cool with the other sandstone that we've already chosen. So I'm going to right click on my agent. Okay, and make sure that we put this into our second slot. Talk. And there we have our pyramid, our multicolored pyramid. The last thing that Neve mentioned at the beginning of the webinar was sandstorms and how the Egyptians learned to adapt and edit the way that they live their lives, basically, to survive in sandstorms. So let's see if we can actually code a sandstorm to occur in our ancient Egyptian city. So I'm going to, first of all, bring out another chat command block and name it Sandstorm. Okay, and now I'm going to go into blocks because I know that there is a sand block that exists. Okay, so what we could do is we could get loads of blocks of sand to randomly spawn in the sky to make it seem as if there is a sandstorm occurring. So if I look through these, I can see that there is a place block at and then the coordinates. Okay, so I can bring that block out and add it to our chat command. And then I'm going to change that block to be sand. Now, and I said that I wanted it to be a random positions in the sky, not the same position every time. So let's go into positions here and see if there's any blocks that we could use. And the very first one I see there is pick a random position, that big block there. So I'm going to put that inside here. And now I'm going to choose some random coordinates. So I'm going to choose 10, 10, 10, okay, until I'm going to go with 60, okay? And you can choose whatever coordinates you would like now. And I'm going to test out that code now. T to talk. Sandstorm. Okay, so, let's have a look at our code and see what happened there. Okay, I've noticed it. So we actually have only told our code to do that once. Whereas in a sandstorm, one piece of sand doesn't fall from the sky. Many, many pieces of sand get blown all around. So I'm going to use a loop. Okay, and I'm going to say that it's going to happen 100 times. So you could add this into forever, to a forever block, but then that'll be a lot of sand that you'll have to clean up afterwards to your town. So I'm going to change this now to 100, and then I'm going to test out my code. Okay, so now I'm going to do T to talk and type in sandstorm to see our sandstorm occur in our Egyptian city. Okay, and you can see all of our sand is randomly appearing up above our heads and falling down onto our city. And actually, you can see that it does land, and actually it can break the cactuses and it can land on top of your pyramids. So remember that you'll have to go and actually get rid of the sand blocks in your city if you've built up a lot of shops or houses. Okay, and that is all of the coding that we have for you today with our Egyptian project. So I'm going to pass you on over to Neve now, who is going to go through what we learned today and the home challenge.
Thanks, Kaylin. And I loved how resilient you were when there was a bug when you were building your pyramid. And that's something obviously to flag that obviously when you're coding, sometimes you can have bugs in your code and you have to just stick with it and try and debug. So I loved how you got your big pyramid built in the end. So today we covered loads of different things. So we learned how to build a lake using code. It mightn't have been as long as the River Nile in Egypt, but we learned how to do that using code. We also learned how to create a sandstorm using code. And I know them lumps of sand that were falling, I wouldn't like them to fall on my head. And we also learned how to build a pyramid. So, for this week's home challenge, we want you to conduct some research on ancient Egypt and find out more about Egypt and build out the city. And then we want you to spawn some more NPCs to live in the buildings and more animals to live in the city and live in the city that you built. Okay, so that's our home challenge for this week.
Okay, thanks, Neve. So that is a really exciting challenge, and hopefully you learn a lot about ancient Egypt and what the cities looked like, because we didn't even get to touch on that today. So build out some shops that you think might have existed, or where people used to live in ancient Egypt, and have fun with that, and spawning some NPCs. So thank you so much for joining us today and participating in our Egyptian project. Do remember that you can catch everything that we put here on our Wakelet and watch previous episodes and everything up there. And we're looking forward to seeing you next week. So, bye.
Bye.